Okay, there we go. So this is the presentation we've got here. So what I'll do is I will go through the presentation and all the frequently asked questions that we have. And then once we go through the questions that we've got, frequently asked questions, at the end, I will unmute everybody on the chat. And you can then let me know if you've got any questions. Any questions you have during the presentation, if you want to put down anything, write it down on a note or send it in the direct chat. And what I'll do is at the end of the presentation, I will then be able to go through any questions that you have, all right? Okay, so this session today is frequently asked questions and their answers. And this is the kind of one that we put forward for tenants, so letting them know what they need to do throughout the tenancy. So we start with what happens when landlord or letting agent lodges the deposit. So essentially when a tenant takes on the property, they'll pay the deposit to the letting agent or landlord. The landlord then has 30 working days to lodge the deposit within a tenancy deposit scheme. Now, once they do, so they'll give us the details of the tenancy start date, how much the deposit is, and the landlord or letting agent will then pay the deposit directly to SafeDeposits Scotland. So we'll then hold and protect the funds for the deposit. Now, once we have the funds in, we will send an activation link to the tenant, which will state your deposit has been registered with you, and it'll ask you to click on a link to activate your account. And when you do that, you'll then be asked to enter your email address, your postcode of the property you're renting, and your DRA number, which is sent to you on the email with the link for when your deposit's registered. Once you do that, you'll then download your deposit certificate and you just hold and protect that for the duration of the tenancy, and that will provide you with your deposit account number, which you'll need to either log on to your account or to log in and claim your deposit back. All right, so on to the next one we've got here. So how do I log into my SafeDeposits Scotland account? So as I said there, you'll activate your account at the start of the tenancy. Once you've done that, you'll then have a note of your DAN number, so that's your deposit account number, and your DRA number, which is your deposit repayment number. Now, if you're on the SafeDeposits Scotland website, there is a selection for tenants. And if you click on the tenant section, it'll ask you to log in using your name, your DAN number, and your DRA number. Now, the system is quite case sensitive. So if you are putting on, if you're logging in, what we would advise you to do is if you can copy your name exactly as it is in your first email you receive, so the activation email, and if that includes any middle names, or if your name's been entered like in capital letters, basically our system needs to match what the landlord or agents have put in when they've registered your deposit. That will then allow you to log into your deposit account where you can update your contact details. So if you want to update your telephone number or email address, you can do it from there. And you'll have access to your account so that when you want to claim your deposit back, you can log in to do that directly through there. And that's logging into your account from there. So who's the lead tenant? So this is decided at the start of the tenancy, and this can be decided by the landlord or agent and the tenants. And essentially the lead tenant is the one person that is appointed to deal with the deposit during the time that the deposit's lodged with us. Now, the reason we appoint a lead tenant is so that we have got one main person that we speak to deal with the account. If you can imagine, if we have an HMO property where there's maybe 6 tenants and each 6 tenant is contacting us about the same sort of issue, it cuts down the amount of people. So we have one main point of contact who can log in and agree or disagree with any proposal, or can log in and claim the deposit back on behalf of all tenants at the end of the tenancy. Now, each individual tenant, if it's a multiple tenancy, they can log in at any time once the proposal's entered and add on their bank details. It's just that the other tenants can't essentially agree or disagree with any proposal that's put forward. So the onus is on the lead tenant to do that. The lead tenant is also therefore, if a deposit was to go into dispute for any reason, they would be our main point of contact. The lead tenant would also be the one that's responsible for uploading evidence if there was a deposit that was in dispute. All tenants can contribute towards the evidence, but if they were to send all that information to the lead tenant, then it's essentially the lead tenant who would upload it onto the evidence portal for us to make sure that everything's collated in the one place. All right, and that's the process for the lead tenant. So that's why we appoint just one lead tenant at the start of the tenancy. All right. So what happens if a co-tenant or one tenant is moving out but the others are remaining? So we have a function with SafeDeposits Scotland, which is actually great. So what can happen is if one tenant decides to leave the property at the partway through the tenancy, they give notice to the landlord or agent are accepting of that, obviously dependent on what details are in your contract. You might find that in your tenancy agreement, you might need to find a replacement tenant before one tenant can vacate the property. So we would advise you to refer to your contract just to find out what the terms and conditions are for that. But essentially, when one tenant vacates the property, if everything is agreed with the agent or the landlord with the tenant that's vacating, then essentially what the landlord and agent then do is they can log on to their account or they can contact Safe Deposits, and there is an option there which states one tenant. It's called a tenant changeover. They can select which tenant's vacating and how much of the deposit they're due back. That will then send an email to the outgoing tenant to say you've vacated the property, you're due this amount back, and that tenant is then prompted to log on to their account and agree to the tenant changeover to receive the funds back and pop in the bank details for where they would like the money returned to. Now, once they go ahead and do that, a notification will then go to the landlord or agent to say this tenant's confirmed they've vacated, and it's up to the landlord and agent at that stage to then complete the tenant changeover. And the reason that there's that third step there is because the landlord or the letting agent may have a new tenant to add on. So if there's somebody taking over in place of the tenant that's vacating, that then gives them the opportunity to do that. Now, each step of the way, there is an email sent out to advise what happens next, but the tenant changeover essentially is a three-step process. So the landlord or agent will initiate it to see which tenant's vacating and how much they're due back. The tenant who's vacating will log on to agree to accept it and enter their bank details for the return of the deposit. And then the landlord will finalise it by completing it and then adding on new tenants if they've got them in the place, which will then move the deposit to a new deposit account number. So that can be done any time during the tenancy when there's an agreement between the landlord and agent and the tenant in place. All right. And then the next section we've got here, so how is the deposit repaid at the end of the tenancy? So once the tenancy ends, the tenant can claim the deposit back. So we advise you not to do that until you've vacated the property and returned the keys to the letting agent or landlord. Now, once you've done that, you can then log on and claim the deposit back. That will send a notification to the letting agent or landlord to say, tenants confirmed they've vacated the property and they're looking for the deposit to be returned. Now, once they do that, a notification will be sent and the letting agent and the landlord will then have 30 working days to respond to that. Now, within that time, the landlord or agent will then be able to do their checkout report at the property, see if there is any findings, and they'll be able to report back to the tenant to see whether they're looking to make a claim on the deposit for anything they find at the checkout, like sort of kind of cleaning, damage, anything along those lines. The tenant then gets the option to agree or disagree with any claims that's been made. If the landlord just goes out and checks the property and says, yep, property's absolutely fine, they then just need to agree to your proposal and we then return the money to the tenant's bank account within 5 working days. Typically it's 2 to 3 days, but the maximum time period we're allowed is the 5 working days. So as also alternatively, the letting agent or landlord can initiate the proposal at the end of the tenancy first. So if, for instance, the tenant and the landlord or agent do a checkout at the property at the same time, and they're all there together, and it's agreed upon that, for instance, the full deposit's to go back to the tenant, the agent or landlord then might go home or to the office, enter the proposal to say, that's fine, the deposit's to be returned to the tenant in full. The tenant will then get the notification of that, and they then just need to respond and agree to it and provide us with the bank details for where they would like the money to be returned to. And we would then process that again within 5 working days. If there is as I said, if there is a claim made against the tenant's deposit, and the tenant does disagree with it, then they do have the option to select that they disagree, and that would then pop the case into the dispute side, which we'll go over next. But certainly that's the main steps for how it's repaid at the end of the tenancy, is by either party claiming the deposit back. Right. So for the tenant, so what should we do if I disagree with the repayment requested that's been entered by the landlord? So if you're a tenant and the landlord or agent has done a checkout at the property, and you feel like the claim they're looking to make against the deposit, you don't agree with, then what you can then do is we advise you to speak to the landlord or the agent in the first instance. So get a breakdown of what the claim is, why they're making a claim from your deposit, and for what reason. If after having that discussion you still disagree with it, then you can respond to their claim by saying you disagree with the claim that's being made. And once you disagree with that, it will then fall into the formal disputes process. When the deposit is in dispute, there's a 5 working day for negotiation and self-resolution. So at that time, our self-resolution team would contact both parties, so the landlord and agent and the tenant, to say the deposit's in dispute, this is the claim that's being made, and try to get your reasons why you've disputed the claim. So any attempts to resolve you have. So if you're a tenant and you've been trying to speak to the landlord, but you feel that the landlord's being unreasonable with their claim, or you disagree with the claim because it was maybe something that broke during the tenancy that you notified the landlord of, you would then let our self-resolution team know your reasons why you disputed the claim. They would then speak to the landlord or agent and say, this is the tenant's reasons for it, to see if we're able to negotiate, either to accept a counterclaim, something maybe with a reduced amount, or to see if we can come to some sort of amicable resolution. If we can't do that, so if we can't come to an amicable resolution for any reason, the deposit will go into the formal disputes process. And when it's in there, it's an evidence-based disputes process. So what we will ask the landlord or letting agent to do is they will have to provide their evidence first. So they get 10 working days to submit their evidence. And then at the end of the 10 working days, we will notify tenant that your landlord or letting agent has uploaded their evidence. The tenant then gets to view the evidence that's been submitted, and they then get to submit their own. So you can view what the landlord or letting agent has put forward as to why they're making a claim on your deposit, and you can then either give your version of events, or you can provide us with your evidence, so why you're disputing the claim and what your evidence is. If you have photographs or copies of like maybe email correspondence or anything, that can all be uploaded as part of your evidence submission. And then after your 10 working day period lapses, the letting agent or landlord gets a period of 5 working days to review your submission. So they get to view the evidence you've provided, but at that stage, the landlord or agent can't provide any further evidence, but what they can provide is what's called a supplementary submission. So they can basically view your evidence and make comment on it. So if they want to say, well, I understand what the tenant's saying about this part of the claim, but here's my reasons why, or if they wanted to go into any further detail at that stage, they can. We just can't accept any further physical evidence. It's just basically a response to what the tenant has submitted. And once that 5 working day period passes, it goes into pre-adjudication review. So when it goes into pre-adjudication review, the team here at Safe Deposits just check over the evidence that's been submitted just to ensure that we have the key documents the adjudicator needs for the likes of, that would be the tenancy agreement, because they can't do an adjudication without a copy of the tenancy agreement. We've then got a copy of the check-in and check-out report, and it's then picked up by an independent adjudicator. Now, the independent adjudicator does have a maximum of 25 working days to come to a decision and have it published. We are finding at the moment most decisions are coming out between 10 to 12 working days. Obviously it fluctuates over busy periods, but we don't usually take at any time the full maximum 25 working days to have that decision published. Now, when the decision is published, there's a further 10 working day period, and what that's for is for requests for review. So the tenant or the landlord and agent can request a review of the adjudicator's decision. So if you do feel there's been an error made in either fact or law, you can request a review of the decision. And what would then happen is you'd have to point out exactly where you feel there's been an error made in fact or law. So if the adjudicator has overlooked a vital piece of evidence that you've put forward, or they've made an error in law, so in Scottish law surrounding tenancy deposit legislation or the private residential tenancy agreement, if they've made an error there, you could then point that out. And what happens is it's then picked up by a second adjudicator for them to have a look over the case for you to decide whether the decision will be changed or if it will stand as the initial adjudicator's decision that was put forward. And then once the final decision is made, there's a period of 5 working days before the payment is then made out to all parties at that stage. So so that's what we do if there's a disagreement. Now, the adjudication process is quite a lengthy process. As I said, it's 10 working days for each landlord and tenant, and then 25 working days for the adjudicator. Now, if for any reason you were to upload your evidence, for instance, in day 1, then what we would then do is we would advise you to contact us to say, I've uploaded all my evidence, I don't have anything further to add, and we can then move the case on. So essentially that reduces it by 9 working days, which is almost 2 weeks. So it then puts it forward to try and get the case moving on a wee bit further forward for you. All right, so that's what happens with there. And that's, we're going to open it up to questions now. So I've just seen a question has come through, and let me have a wee look. I'll unmute everybody so we can have a wee look and see what's happened. Just a wee second. All right, let me see. Right, okay, so I will try to unmute everybody. Oh, let me see. Okay, so if you do have a question to ask, you should be able to unmute yourself now. I'll see if I can get it to unmute here. Okay, so I can see here we've got a question through from Charles. So your landlord is charging rent after my end of lease because I self-isolated of COVID for 10 days. Is it legal? So legal matters we can't really advise on, to be honest. We're not legally trained. We're only trained in relation to deposit protection. But essentially, if your tenancy has ended, but you have had to stay in the property, then you are still living there. So you should have to obviously pay rent for the time that you are living at the property. But I would advise you to possibly contact Shelter Scotland, as they would be able to give you free legal advice on that matter, just if it's something that yourself and the landlord are dealing with a dispute over. But essentially, if you're still living in the property for those 10 days you were self-isolating for, then you should be looking to pay rent for those periods that you were still in the property. All right, thank you. Let me have a wee look. Is there anywhere on the paperwork the third party name be added to the info other than another interested party? Okay, Alan, what I might ask you to do is if you're able to unmute, just so we can discuss that one, just so I can elaborate a wee bit further. Yeah, check on that one. Can we hear you all right? Is there anywhere on the paper? Right, I don't think we can hear you, even though we've got you unmuted. Have you got your volume on, like your speaker on? Okay.
Alan, are you able to just put it into the chat so that we can answer your questions? Don't be able to seem to hear you.
All unmuted here. Right, okay, that's fine. So I think the question might relate to maybe adding like a guarantor or something onto the deposit account by the looks of it. So add a third party name. So it seems like you can hear me, but I don't think we can hear you.
Hi, Alan. Yeah, I can answer that one. If you pay deposits for a third party, for example, if it's a company, what we would say is you can add the tenant's name on there, but you can also add the company's name within the company box. We would ask as well, if the tenant hasn't paid that deposit but the company has, that you add the company's contact information, so that it's the company that's contacted at the end of tenancy. Local authority homeless unit, yeah. So it would be the company name that goes in there, and at least that way, at the end of the tenancy, we can contact the company rather than the tenant.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to see how to get it on. It's weird how we can't hear you guys, but I'm obviously sure you can hear us. Right, okay, we've got another wee question in here. Right, we'll try to...
Oh, hi there. Yeah, so when the deadline date there, so the 27th of July, it's midnight on the 27th. So the landlord will have to respond by 23:59. If there is no response by that point, yeah, then notification is sent out soon afterwards to let you know that there hasn't been a response.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and do we have any other questions on that? Obviously, what will be happening is the slides that we have for today will be put on to YouTube. So we will be able to see that, and if MD needs to, we can send over the details as well. So helpline number, so would that be for ourselves, our contact number, or for Shelter Scotland for legal advice? Oh, for us.
Yeah, I can give you our number. It's 03333 213 136. There are different options available once you phone through, so just select whichever option is more relevant to you.
No problem at all. We can see. So, just check and see if we have any more questions coming through. I don't think we do. Okay, that's fine. Oh, wait a minute, I've seen another one pop through. It doesn't give us a very big window for seeing them. Yeah, so we do have on our telephone lines when you phone in, it's like option 1 for tenants, 2 for landlords, 3 for agents. If you select option 5, that's the actual end of tenancy line. So if you do feel like you're going to have a dispute with your landlord at any point, if you contact the end of tenancy line, it should be either Samantha or Cameron you'll get through to, and you'll be able to put to them why you think the case might go into dispute, and they'll be able to give you help on that. So they don't have to provide a specific date for the date and age of the bathroom. What the adjudicator would do is they will take into consideration the age of the item, for instance. So on the check-in report, it would probably say whether the bathroom suite, for instance, was brand new, or if not. But if the adjudicator did feel like they had to get some more information, then what they would then do is they would contact out to the agent or landlord to say, do you have this information? So if they feel it's relevant to the claim, they will ask for further information for that. Yep, let's see. Yeah. Okay, so for guarantors, we don't advise putting them on the tenancy agreement, even though they pay the deposit at on the deposit account. Sorry, even though they pay the deposit at the start of the tenancy. If you put the tenants named on the tenancy agreement on the deposit account, what will then happen is when it gets to the end of the tenancy and the tenants are due to vacate the property, what you can do is that the tenants can then put forward the bank details for the guarantor, so they can give us the guarantor's bank details where we can then return the money to them. But essentially, as far as I'm aware, in our regulations, it states that the information we have on the deposit account has to match essentially what you've got on your tenancy agreement. So your tenants that are listed should be on the deposit account with us. All right. That's great, no problem. As I said, the tenant can choose whose bank details they add at the end of the tenancy. So if they want to add on the guarantor's bank details so the money goes straight back to them, we can facilitate that. That's not a problem at all.
So just as a further point on that as well, tenants often assume that we hold their bank details. So when you've paid your deposit directly to your letting agent or landlord, they then forward that payment to us, so we never know what the tenant's bank details are. There has been times in the past where tenants have not received their deposit back, and it's simply because they just haven't logged on and entered the bank details. So as soon as you've got a proposal email sent out to you, log on to your account and add that information there. And if you've got any trouble logging in whatsoever, you can give us a wee phone and we can do that over the phone for you as well if it's easier.
So we'll just wait and see if we have any other questions to come through. I think we'll get a bit of sound now. I don't know if anybody's got any other questions to come through. No. That's fine. Well, as I said, what we will be doing is we'll be putting, I said, the presentation online, so it will be there. If for reason you want a copy of the slides or anything sent over, if you pop an email over to the events email address, then we can do that for you. That's not a problem. Obviously, we're happy to stay here for a wee while longer, just in case anybody does have any questions. But if you guys have got the information you need, I'm more than happy if you want to log off and get on with your day. And thank you for joining us. As I said, we're here just now for the time being. So if you do need to go, that's absolutely fine. And if not, if anybody's got any questions they further want to add, we'll still be here. And thank you for joining us today. No, that's great. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. So the presentation can be emailed over to you, Kirsten. So if you reply to the email you booked it from, so I think it would have been events@SafeDeposits, and just ask for a copy of it to be sent over to you, we can then ping it over. We'll email it to you, but it will be on the SafeDeposits YouTube channel probably within the next 2 to 3 working days.
Kirsten, after you've watched that back as well, if you've got any questions that you wanted to ask, just fire that over in an email too. We can answer that later on for you. No worries, that's fine.
Let's make sure we haven't missed any
That's another one,
questions.
yeah.
Oh, thanks, Amy.
You too, Kirsten.
There we go. Okay, if we don't have any further questions, what we'll do is we'll log off now and we'll stop the session recording. As I said, if there is anything you need, please just get in touch with us by email or by giving us a call. It's not a problem at all. All right. Take care.